Let's get something straight right now. Dominion is not a dirty word. From the very beginning, God created man with a mandate. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have dominion. That wasn't a polite suggestion. That was a kingdom command. Yet somehow, many believers today believe we're supposed to shrink back from the marketplace and just pray that someone else brings change. No, that's not kingdom. That's compromise. We were never called to hide in the church. We were called to be salt and light in the world. And there's no brighter spotlight than the marketplace. It's where ideas are exchanged, wealth is created, and influence is multiplied. When you dominate the marketplace, you don't just make money, you make impact. You don't just increase your income, you expand the kingdom. And we serve a king who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. If he owns it all, why are his people acting like spiritual beggars? The marketplace is a mirror of stewardship. When you step into the arena of business, economics, and entrepreneurship, you're not just operating a company, you're operating a calling. Every time you solve a problem, you fulfill a purpose. Every time you serve a client with excellence, you're representing heaven's brand. The world doesn't need more broke believers. It needs bold believers who know that money is not their master but their tool. You see, money in the hands of the wicked corrupts culture, but money in the hands of the righteous redeems it. We need Christians who understand that wealth isn't evil, it's exponential. It multiplies whatever is in your heart. If your heart is surrendered to God, wealth becomes a weapon for worship. You'll feed the poor, fund the missions, build the schools, pay off the churches, and send the gospel to the ends of the earth, not just with prayer, but with power. And that power doesn't start with capital. It starts with confidence. Confidence that you were born for more. Confidence that you have value to bring. Confidence that your product, your service, your idea has been given by God to bless the earth. You don't need the world's permission to prosper. You've already been given heaven's assignment to dominate. People say, well, isn't it selfish to want to dominate? No, it's selfish not to. Because when you refuse to rise, others remain oppressed. When you choose smallness, others stay stuck. When you avoid responsibility, others live in lack. You were born to solve problems. And the person who solves the most problems gets paid the most money and has the most influence. That's not greed, that's governance. We have too many Christians praying for influence, but running from responsibility. You can't have dominion without diligence. You can't occupy territory without taking territory. The wealth of the wicked is laid up for the just, but the just have to show up, show out, and show results. Faith without works is dead, and favor without execution is wasted. It's time to stop treating the marketplace like a mission field and start treating it like a mission front. This is where kingdom economics becomes kingdom expansion. God is raising up believers who understand business, who execute with excellence, and who lead with integrity, not just to be rich, but to be relevant. Because at the end of the day, the world listens to those who lead. And in the marketplace, leadership is earned through service, value, and vision. When you dominate the marketplace, you're not just building a brand, you're building a legacy. And that legacy will point back to the King of Kings, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you served the best. So rise up, believer. The world is waiting on you not to beg, but to build, not to borrow, but to lead, not to survive, but to dominate. Because that's what you were born to do. In the very beginning, God laid out his intention for humanity with crystal clarity. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have dominion. This wasn't poetic language or symbolic sentiment. It was a divine mandate. And when God gives a command, he also gives capacity. That means every believer carries with them divine DNA for dominion. But we've allowed culture, tradition, and fear to condition us into believing that dominion is wrong, that ambition is unholy, and that success in the marketplace is a distraction from our spiritual calling. Let me tell you the truth. Dominion in the marketplace is part of your spiritual calling. We were never meant to be the tail. We were called to be the head. That means we're supposed to be leading in innovation, setting the standards in business, and modeling excellence in entrepreneurship. Dominion is not about domination. It's about divine responsibility. It's not about lording over people, but stewarding influence. And the marketplace is one of the primary arenas where that influence is exercised. Look at the parables Jesus told. So many of them were about money, investments, workers, managers, and stewards. He wasn't just giving spiritual lessons. He was talking about kingdom economics. He was preparing us to function in a world where value must be created, multiplied, and managed. The marketplace isn't some secular space detached from the spiritual life. It is the very battleground where faith, ethics, service, and leadership intersect. Too many believers have adopted a poverty gospel that teaches retreat instead of rulership. They say, let the world have the wealth, we'll just focus on holiness. But that's a false dichotomy. You were never asked to choose between holiness and influence, between righteousness and relevance. You are called to have both. Because when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people mourn. And make no mistake, the marketplace rules everything. It influences education, media, government, healthcare, and culture at large. Whoever controls the marketplace shapes the future. So when Christians vacate the marketplace, they are not being humble. They are being irresponsible. Because when light retreats, darkness takes over. When kingdom people remain silent, secular systems get louder. If we believe that the gospel is the solution to the world's deepest problems, then why wouldn't we position ourselves where those problems are being addressed? And more importantly, why wouldn't we take our seat at the table where decisions are made, resources are allocated, and nations are shaped? God didn't give you gifts, ideas, creativity, and strategies just for Sunday morning. He gave them to you to be fruitful. Every day, everywhere. Fruitfulness isn't just souls saved, it's problems solved. It's lives improved. It's businesses built. It's families supported through the income you generate. It's churches planted through the tithes you contribute as it helps us. It's global missions funded by the surplus you steward. This is not about ego, this is about obedience. The world system is not going to wait for Christians to catch up. They're already running. They're already dominating. They're already making decisions that affect your children, your churches, and your communities. So we don't have time to sit in spiritual indecision. It's time for believers to step into the marketplace with authority, with wisdom, and with the confidence that comes from knowing this was God's idea from the beginning. So when I say Christians should dominate in the marketplace, I don't mean we should seek power for power's sake. I mean we should fulfill the Genesis mandate. I mean we should reflect the King in how we create, how we lead, how we produce, and how we serve. Dominion is not a man-made desire, it's a God-ordained destiny. And if you're serious about advancing the kingdom, it helps us. You've got to stop just praying for it. You've got to start building it. And that starts with showing up where the action is Q, the marketplace. Money is not the problem. Money is not evil. The love of money is. And that distinction matters more now than ever before, especially for Christians called to influence the marketplace. You see, money is a magnifier. It doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are. When money flows into the hands of someone surrendered to God, it becomes an extension of their assignment. It becomes fuel for kingdom impact. But when Christians avoid wealth, thinking it's ungodly, they leave the door open for others to use money for manipulation, corruption, and self-glorification. That's not stewardship. That's negligence. Let's be clear, poverty doesn't make you holy. Scarcity doesn't make you spiritual. Just because struggling financially doesn't mean you're closer to God than the person who's prospering. In fact, many times prosperity is proof of obedience. Think about Abraham. Think about Joseph. Think about David. These men were not just spiritual leaders. They were economic giants. They governed resources, managed cities, built legacies, and influenced nations. And they did it under the anointing and direction of God. They didn't apologize for their wealth because they knew the source of it. And they knew the purpose of it. When Christians generate wealth through value, integrity, and excellence, they are not just building their bank account, they are building God's agenda. Money is neutral, but when placed in the hands of the righteous, it becomes a tool for transformation. It builds schools. It sponsors missionaries. It plants churches. It launches initiatives that solve real problems in real communities. The devil isn't afraid of broke Christians, but he trembles when believers understand that wealth is a weapon. Because with money comes the power to found the message, expand the reach, and accelerate the mission. The problem is many Christians have been taught that wanting more is selfish. But wanting more so you can do more is stewardship. When your heart is aligned with God's will, more money simply means more impact. That's why God promised to bless his people, not just spiritually, but materially. He told Israel he would give them land, houses they didn't build, vineyards they didn't plant. Why? Because influence requires infrastructure, and influence costs money. We can't keep praying for revival in our cities while refusing to fund the very platforms that can sustain revival. The gospel is free, but the means to spread it, technology, media, buildings, missions, cost resources. And if Christians don't rise up financially, they will be at the mercy of those who do not share their values. Influence in today's world isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about who funds the vision. Whoever pays controls the platform. That's why we must shift our mindset from scarcity to abundance, from survival to strategy, from lack to legacy. The reason most Christians are not dominating the marketplace is not because they don't love God. It's because they haven't learned how to steward money with purpose. We've been taught to teeth, but not how to multiply. We've been taught to give, but not how to grow. But God never designed us to just manage lack. He designed us to master increase. The parable of the talents wasn't about breaking even. It helps us. It was about multiplication. And the one who hid his talent and played it safe, he was rebuked, not rewarded. So if you're a believer with a business, a product, an idea, or a service, it's time to embrace the true thing. When money flows through your hands, it should carry purpose with it. Your revenue is not just for your rent. It's for your reach. Your profit is not just for your pleasure. It's for people. Every dollar is a decision. Every transaction is a testimony. And every increase is an opportunity to represent the King in the marketplace. Money in the hands of a righteous believer doesn't corrupt. It converts. The marketplace is not just a place where money is exchanged. It is a spiritual battlefield where purpose is revealed, refined, and released. One of the biggest lies Christians have believed is that business and spirituality are separate lanes. But God never intended for us to compartmentalize our faith. He designed work and value creation as a spiritual assignment from the very beginning. Before man ever sinned, he was given a job. Adam was tasked to tend the garden, name the animals, and manage God's creation. Work is not a curse. It's a calling. And when you operate in the marketplace with purpose, you're fulfilling a divine design. Let's get this straight, Q. Business is not secular. Business is sacred when it's done God's way. The reason so many believers feel unfulfilled is because they're sitting on gifts that were never meant to stay dormant. They're praying for opportunities, but ignoring the marketplace as one of the greatest platforms to use what God put inside them. Business is a ministry. Solving problems is a ministry. Serving people is a ministry. When you meet someone's need, you become an answer to their prayer. That's spiritual impact. That's kingdom in motion. The Bible is filled with marketplace leaders who were used by God in extraordinary ways. Joseph didn't just interpret dreams. He managed economies. He stored grain, distributed resources, and positioned Egypt to survive and thrive in the midst of famine. That was value creation on a national scale. Lydia was a seller of purple, a businesswoman whose resources supported the early church. Proverbs 31 describes a woman who buys fields, sells garments, manages her household, and provides for the poor, all through enterprise. Why? Because the marketplace is where God places his people to influence culture and fund his work. Christians are called to be producers, not just consumers. You are not here just to take up space and pay bills. You are here to solve problems, meet needs, create opportunities, and reflect the excellence of the kingdom in everything you do. Every time you bring value into someone's life, you are stepping into your spiritual assignment. Whether you own a business, work in sales, create content, or consult clients, you are operating in your gifting when you bring meaningful change into the world. We must stop separating the sacred from the strategic. God wants you to monetize your gifts, not because he needs your money, but because he wants you to fulfill your purpose. When you package your skills, when you deliver solutions, when you build systems that bless people, that's worship. You are reflecting the creativity, order, and intentionality of the God who created you. And let's be real, in a broken world full of pain, confusion, and problems, God needs believers who will bring value with conviction, serve with excellence, and lead with integrity. You can't wait for someone to hand you permission. God already gave it to you. He placed inside of you a unique combination of skills, stories, and strategies that no one else can offer the world in the way you can. And when you show up in the marketplace with that God-given package, you're not just doing business, you're doing destiny. And guess what? The world is desperate for people who actually care, who actually deliver, and who actually solve something real. That's why the marketplace is a spiritual assignment. Because when you thrive in your gifting, God gets the glory. When your business grows, your influence grows. And when your influence grows, your impact multiplies. So stop waiting for a pulpit. Your platform might be a podcast. Your ministry might be in a marketing strategy. Your pulpit might be a product or service that changes lives. God uses it all because at the end of the day, creating value isn't optional for a believer. It's obedience. Faith is not just for Sunday mornings or desperate prayers when your back is against the wall. Faith is a multiplier. Faith is the spiritual engine that turns ideas into income, vision into ventures, and calling into cash flow. If you are a believer, then your ability to dominate in the marketplace will rise or fall based on your faith. Not just the kind of faith that believes God exists, but the kind of bold, activated, unshakable faith that believes he wants you to prosper, increase, and create. Faith is the foundation, but it must be translated into forward motion. Faith without works is dead, and dreams without execution are just fantasies. Most Christians think faith is about surviving until breakthrough, but real faith isn't passive, it's aggressive. It doesn't just wait for doors to open, it builds new doors. It doesn't beg for opportunities, it creates them. Real faith is entrepreneurial. It believes God gave you the power to produce wealth and the authority to take territory. But if you don't believe that increases your portion, you'll sabotage every opportunity God puts in front of you. That's why renewing your mind is essential. Because if your mindset is built on fear, lack, or guilt, your faith will always be limited by your self-image. Look at the parable of the talents. The master gave 3 servants different amounts. 2 of them invested and multiplied. The third buried his talent because he was afraid. And what did the master call him? Wicked and lazy. Not because he failed, but because he didn't believe multiplication was his responsibility. Fear is not humility. Playing small is not spiritual. God expects increase where he has made an investment. And the marketplace is one of the most visible places to show your faith through fruitfulness. Faith gives you the confidence to charge what you're worth. Faith gives you the boldness to launch even when you feel unqualified. Faith pushes you to apply, pitch, speak, sell, serve, and scale. Faith says, if God gave me this vision, he'll also give me the provision. Faith doesn't look at what you lack. It looks at who you have. And when you have God backing you, you've already got the majority. But if you keep thinking small, asking small, and planning small, don't be surprised when small is all you get. The marketplace rewards those who move with clarity and confidence. Confidence, but confidence be rooted in something stronger than just personality or education. It must be rooted in revelation. That revelation says, I am created in the image of God. I am called to create, to serve, to produce, and to prosper. I am not a mistake, as it helps us. I am not inferior. I am not here to just get by. I am here to take territory for the kingdom. That mindset, backed by faith, changes how you show up in business. You don't shrink in rooms, you command them. You don't compete, you dominate through service and strategy. Faith also sustains you through resistance. Because let's be honest, the marketplace will test you. There will be setbacks, slow months, rejection, and delays. But faith doesn't fold when results don't show up instantly. Faith keeps sowing, keeps showing up, and keeps serving until the harvest comes. Faith doesn't get excited at the idea stage. It pushes through the execution stage. It stays planted, it stays focused, and it stays aligned with God's timing. That's why you can't build your business on trends, emotions, or algorithms. You have to build it on faith, because faith is what gives you supernatural endurance. Faith allows you to scale when others are shrinking. Faith lets you speak value when others are discounting their worth. Faith says, my source is not my clients, it's my covenant. And when that's your posture, you won't just survive the marketplace. You'll dominate it with divine precision. Because faith isn't just a belief, it's a blueprint for expansion. The kingdom of God is not built on good intentions. It's built on obedience, action, and resources. We cannot spiritualize our way around this truth. God uses people to fund his vision on earth. That includes buildings, outreaches, missions, ministries, and movements. And guess what? All of those require money. That's why marketplace success for Christians is not just about personal prosperity. It's about kingdom impact. When you thrive financially, you don't just elevate your own life. You empower the church to operate at full capacity. You become a vessel through which God's purposes are resourced and released. Let's stop pretending that money doesn't matter. Try sending a missionary without money. Try keeping the lights on in a church with just good vibes and holy intentions. It doesn't work. And yet, many believers still resist the idea that they're called to generate significant wealth. They think it's worldly to have financial goals or to build profitable businesses, but how is it worldly to fund the very things God wants to do on earth? How is it unspiritual to create overflow that equips ministries, feeds the poor, builds hospitals, launches schools, and preaches the gospel across nations? Money in the hands of a righteous man is a force for righteousness. When Christians dominate in the marketplace, they gain influence over the world systems. And they also gain the financial power to support God's agenda without compromise. No more relying on crumbs. No more apologizing for asking. No more begging for help. Marketplace dominance gives you the power to say yes to big visions because you have the means to make them reality. Kingdom expansion doesn't happen by accident. It happens when people of faith decide they're not just going to believe, they're going to build. And let's be clear, God never had a problem with wealth. He had a problem with idolatry. Wealth is not the enemy. Worshiping it is. But when your heart is surrendered to God and your mission is aligned with heaven's purpose, wealth becomes a weapon of mass construction. It tears down barriers, opens doors, and builds platforms for the gospel to go further, faster, and deeper. Look at the early church. They didn't just preach. They gave, they sold property, they pooled resources, and they made sure every need was met. That's economic unity, and it requires more than just spiritual fire. It requires financial fuel. So many churches and ministries today are sitting on vision, but lacking provision. Not because God doesn't want to provide, but because too many believers have buried their talents instead of multiplying them. They've spiritualized their fear and called it contentment. But contentment doesn't mean complacency. It means you're at peace, but still productive. It means you're grateful, but still growing. You don't have to choose between generosity and growth. You're called to do both. When Christians create wealth in the marketplace, they become kingdom financiers. That means they don't just tithe. They fund entire programs. They don't just give to campaigns. They launch them. They don't just support ministries. They sustain them. And that's what the world needs right now. Faith-driven individuals who can sit at tables of influence and write checks that change lives. You can't do that from a position of lack. You can only do that when you've embraced the call to build wealth on purpose. So don't just dream about impact, fund it. Don't just pray for harvest, sow into it. Don't just wait for revival, invest in it. When Christians dominate in the marketplace, they bring heaven's agenda into earth's economy. And that's when real transformation happens, not just in souls, but in systems. Because whoever controls the resources controls the reach. And it's time for the righteous to rise. The world doesn't follow those with the loudest opinions. It follows those with the most effective solutions. Influence is not about having a title. It's about delivering transformation. And in today's marketplace, the people who rise to the top are not necessarily the smartest or the most connected. They're the ones who solve problems better than anyone else. This is why Christians must stop underestimating their value. You were created in the image of the ultimate problem solver. That means the spirit of wisdom, creativity, innovation, and excellence lives inside of you. You are fully equipped to show up in the marketplace, not just to participate, but to lead. And leadership begins with solving. When Joseph stood before Pharaoh, he didn't quote scriptures or sing songs. He brought a solution to a national crisis. He interpreted a dream, crafted a 14-year economic strategy, and secured the future of Egypt and the surrounding nations. That one moment of solution-based leadership elevated him from prison to palace. Why? Because in every generation, the person who can see what others miss and answer questions others can't gets promoted. And that principle still applies today. If you want to rise in influence, you need to become obsessed with solving. The marketplace is hungry for answers. Be the one who delivers them. Christians often assume that being spiritual means staying separate from secular systems. But Jesus prayed, "Either I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one." That means we're supposed to stay in the systems and influence them from within. You can't influence what you run from. You can't dominate what you refuse to engage. So instead of just preaching to the marketplace, start solving for it. When your product, service, or idea fixes something people deeply care about, they don't just listen to your message, they seek it out. The problem is many believers think that excellence is optional. They believe prayer will replace preparation. But influence doesn't work that way. Favor may open a door, but fruit keeps it open. If you don't deliver, you won't be remembered. In the marketplace, consistency builds credibility. And credibility creates influence. You can't just show up once with good intentions. You've got to consistently produce results that make people say, "I don't know what it is about them, but every time I work with them, my life gets better." That's how you earn trust. That's how you earn attention. That's how you earn the right to lead. And as a believer, this is not just good business, it's good stewardship. Every gift you have was given to bring value. Every insight, idea, skill, or story you carry is meant to solve something for someone. You don't have to solve every problem, but you are called to solve a problem. And when you become known as the person who brings clarity, speed, healing, freedom, or results, you dominate. Not because you're loud, but because you're effective. And the beautiful thing about the kingdom is this: when you solve with the right spirit, you don't just build your business, you build trust in the God you represent. People may not believe your theology at first, but they'll trust your results. And eventually, they'll ask, "How do you do what you do?" That's when the door opens for the gospel. Not through pressure, but through proof. Your fruit becomes your message. Your value becomes your voice. And your impact becomes your invitation to lead people to Christ. So stop downplaying your ability to solve problems. Stop thinking small. Start thinking like a kingdom ambassador. You're not just in business, you're in purpose. You're not just chasing profit, you're creating transformation. The world follows solutionaries. And when Christians rise up with answers, we reclaim territory for the kingdom, one solved problem at a time. Let's bring this all together. God never called his people to take a back seat in culture, in business, or in influence. He called us to lead, to build, to multiply, and to dominate with excellence, wisdom, and integrity. The marketplace is not the enemy, it's an assignment. It's a platform where faith meets function, where purpose meets profit, and where calling meets culture. And if we as believers don't rise up in that space, then we leave it to be ruled by values that have nothing to do with the kingdom of God. This is bigger than money. It's about mandate. This is not just about success, it's about stewardship. God is raising up a generation of faith-filled entrepreneurs, leaders, creators, and innovators who will not just survive the marketplace, but reshape it. People who understand that wealth is a tool, not a trophy. That business is a ministry, not a hustle. And that influence is a responsibility, not a luxury. You are not here to blend in. You're here to take territory. You're here to represent the king in boardrooms, classrooms, Zoom calls, social platforms, product launches, investment meetings, and everywhere in between. Every skill you've been given, every idea you carry, every solution you develop, it all matters. It's all part of your divine assignment to bring the kingdom to earth, not just through sermons, but through systems. So don't apologize for your ambition. Don't shrink to make others comfortable. Don't bury your talents because someone once told you money and ministry can't mix. They must mix. Because when the righteous rise, the people rejoice. It's time for believers to stop waiting for permission and start walking in power. The marketplace is waiting. The kingdom is counting on you. And your moment is now. Dominate with purpose. Dominate with character. Dominate with love. But make no mistake, dominate, because that's what you were born to do.